Good afternoon. This is Megan Raymond with WCET. Can everybody hear me okay? You can just put a little note in the chat box if you can or cannot. Great. Well, we'll go ahead and get started today. Thanks for joining us for our webcast on Out with the Old Tech and In with the New about learning relationship management platforms. I'd like to thank Blackboard Collaborate for making the platform available today. If you have any technical issues, please contact Blackboard directly and I'll put that number into the chat box. As you may have noticed, only the speakers have mic access today. So if you want to communicate with us or share any information or ask questions to the presenters, go ahead and enter them into the chat box. We'll be moderating that chat box and pulling up questions for the Q&A period at the end of each person's presentation. The webcast is being recorded. We'll be sure to send all registrants a copy of the PowerPoint, any resources that are shared, and a link to this recording, which will be on our YouTube channel. As I mentioned, if you have any questions, go ahead and enter them into the chat box. We'll be following those along and sharing them with the presenters. And we have several presenters here today, so let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to introduce Nick White, who's the moderator for this conversation today. Nick is the Director of Competency-Based Learning Solutions at Capella. He's an award-winning instructional designer and administrator, and he's also the Vice Chair of the WCET Steering Committee, and he'll be doing several sessions at the upcoming WCET annual meeting in Denver. So please take it away, Nick.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. So I think this will be a very interesting topic, learning relationship management tools. In the world of technology, and increasingly education as well, nothing ever remains the same. I think many of us have become accustomed to the traditional categories of student information system and learning management system. And now there's this new entrant, the learning relationship management system. So the questions are, why this new category? Why has it emerged? How does it relate to those other categories? How do you think about it? And what results are the pioneers seeing? The pioneers both that created the tools and that are using them at institutions of higher education. So that's what we're here to discuss. I thought before I introduced all of the participants, I'd read how EdVentures defined it in one of their recent papers, their Retention Solutions report. So here's how they talked about it. A learning relationship management system is a system that unites various tools and technologies from CRMs and LMSs to support student success, retention, and predictive analytics. Features include a central repository for learning modules, assessment tools, records management, analytics engines capable of tracking individual learner progress, student interventions, and mapping student progress to learning objectives and career outcomes. That's quite a lot. So that's their definition. And so that's what we're going to dig into today. So with that, I'll introduce our esteemed panel. First is Gunnar Councilman. He's the founder and CEO of Fidelis. He's a former Marine, also a former Bain consultant, and he was an early collaborator on the book Disrupting Class with Clay Christensen that many of you may have heard of. He's originally from San Diego and lives now in the Bay Area with his wife and son. Emily Dustin came to Preservice Learning as an educational strategist after 16 years of teaching and leading school-wide change to competency-based education in both K-12 and adult and continuing education in southern New Hampshire. Brian Peddle is the founder and CEO of Preservice Learning, the next generation education platform that puts the focus on student outcomes. Prior to that, he served as the Chief Technology Officer at College for America at Southern New Hampshire University. And during his time with College for America, he and his team launched a competency-based learning management system and student information system built from the ground up on the Salesforce platform. Audrey Rogers, now we're moving on to the pioneers from the institutional side. Audrey Rogers is Associate Professor and Chair of Secondary and Leadership Programs in the Southern New Hampshire University School of Education. She has been at Southern New Hampshire University for 10 years. Prior to that, she was a high school social studies teacher in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. She's also currently serves as President of the New Hampshire IHE, or Institutions of Higher Education Network, which is a nonprofit consortium of all the educator preparation programs in the state. And Carolyn Simpson from American Public University System oversees the student services teams at that university, which includes advising, career services, student affairs, alumni relations, appeals, and transfer credit. She's been at APUS for 10 years. Prior to her work there, she was a classroom teacher at both the secondary and primary grade levels. So that's our group. We're very happy to have them all here. And now we're going to start out the session by having Gunnar and then Brian introduce how they think about LRMs in higher education. They each have 5 minutes to go through their understanding of it and what results they've seen so far. So over to you, Gunnar.
Gunnar, you'll need to click your talk button. Let's see, Gunnar, you should be able to click that talk button in the upper left-hand corner. Let's go ahead and move to Brian. Brian, I'll advance through to your slides here. And then Gunnar, while Brian's speaking, why don't you go ahead and do your audio setup again? I think you probably have to do it because you logged out and logged back in.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you all for joining us this afternoon. As I was just introduced, I'm Brian Peddle, the CEO of Preservice Learning. And as that was just mentioned in my intro, I was the CTO of College for America, and we built out their CBE program at their Innovation Lab. And that work we've done there really led to the spin-off of Preservice Learning. So when we start to think about the 21st century connected student, we started to see this image come up here. And one of the great things about building up the technology for College for America is that we had the latitude to experiment with new ideas. And although we were initially charged with building out the systems to support a competency-based LMS, we quickly realized to get a full holistic view of the student, we needed an unsiloed view. We really needed elements of the student information system and support for effective coaching, alerting, and student insight at scale. Faculty and staff needed real-time access, which they weren't getting, and this all had to be solved while keeping costs down. When we left SNHU, we knew we had to take a step back and begin working with our design partners in developing a commercial system to meet a wide range of needs we saw. And we started to see some patterns emerging. We paused briefly and decided to take a wider approach by looking at what that 21st century connected student would need for success. Like at College for America, the market was demanding fewer systems and begging for less data silos spread across dozens of systems. So as you can see by this diagram, everything starts to intersect, as it should. When we talk to schools, we often hear these schools talk about it's the other department's responsibility for admissions or alumni, and it really comes down to the collaboration of all of them for the success of the institution and ultimately the success of the student. So earlier in the year, EDUCAUSE laid out what the next generation learning environment should look like, and we all agree with the outcomes of what they came out with their report. However, they never talk about that key piece missing from this model, and they want to break everything down and have this Lego solution where you can plug everything in together. The key thing missing, though, there really is the base plate. How do you take all of these siloed systems and bring them into one place that make it useful for advisors, coaches, teachers to be able to access that information? And I think that's really what we did at SNHU and with CFA, and what we're doing here at Preservice. So when we look at this, to achieve this goal, we built our platform on top of Salesforce, and some of you may be familiar with that platform. It was built for CRM, but it's become much more of an enterprise solution at this point. So using this as a foundation, we can easily slide in pieces that are important to the institution. So although we start to touch on pieces of SIS, CBE, traditional courses, we can easily integrate with systems like Canvas, any LTI or API connection, and pull that all back in to surface that information to the right person at the right time. So we end up with an integrated technology suite, so you have a full holistic view of the student, a true student-centered approach, all of your data in one place, and there are really no more silos. We understand that most people can't really shift their system of record at this point, but if you get all that data in one place, you really start to get a good combination of SIS, LMS, and LRM, which starts to become to be your system of engagement, your system of intelligence. And it really makes a big difference in how you access your students, view them, and help them succeed. And I think the rest of the people on the panel here will talk about the value of LRM and having all that data bumped up to one place. I'm not sure if Gunner's ready now. I can go back.
Yep, I'm all set. Can everybody hear me?
Great.
Excellent. So thanks, Brian, and thanks everybody for dealing with the technical issue there. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the path to LRM. So I first had the idea for this software when I was doing research with Clay Christensen on the book Disrupting Class. This was really early, like 2004 timeframe. And then I spent a couple of years at Bain & Company working primarily in the education sector, and left to be the VP of Operations for Inside Track, which is a coaching company. And then spent a number of years after that acting as an independent consultant to a lot of my former clients. And the entire time I was doing that consulting work and working with Inside Track, the solution to every problem that I was coming across seemed to be the lack of, or to create solid learning relationships with students. And so in 2011, I launched Fidelis, originally to partner with universities in kind of an OPM, if you're familiar with 2U or academic partnerships, in that vein, to partner with universities to solve niche problems, niche outcome problems for their students. So we started with the military to civilian career transition. And as we started to increase the number of partnerships we have, we realized that the primary benefit that the schools were taking from that partnership was they wanted to use the software initially with those niche populations, but then eventually to expand it out to all their students, recognizing the central role that relationships play in learning, and the fact that they didn't have any way to ensure that those relationships were strong. And so in 2013, we pivoted the company to be a software as a service play. And essentially, I want to take a second to talk about the underlying theory behind LRM, because it is an opinionated platform in some ways. And the idea is that people are at their best and they get the most out of their education when they have what we call the 3 Ps of success, right? They have the right kinds of people surrounding them. We think of that as a coach who acts as the guide on the side, supporting them to figure out the right actions to take to accomplish the second P, which is their purpose. So the people is the coach, mentors, and learning communities that support the person to pursue that powerful purpose that is their reason for waking up in the morning, their reason for doing the hard work that it takes to become educated. And then the third P is a clear path of curriculum, content, credentials that ultimately prepares them to pursue that purpose. And the underlying belief of LRM is that when people have those 3 Ps, they're at their best, they get the most value they can out of their education, and as a result, it solves the underlying challenges that all schools are facing right now, which is low conversion rates, low or high dropout rates early on, low graduation rates, and low placement rates in the back end. Now there's 3 tools. The way we think about it is there's 3 underlying tools that make up an LRM. It's very similar in concept to what Brian just said. And those 3 tools are, first, a high-touch advising CRM. This is for the coach. This is for the advisor. This is to allow one person to coach and advise hundreds and hundreds of people at a time without missing anything, delivering that high-touch, personalized service, but to do so at scale. The second thing is the competency-based course and badge authoring tools, right? So tools to allow you to deliver just-in-time content to students when they need it, right? Exactly at the moment of need, and to allow them to build micro-credentials that demonstrate what their capabilities are. And then the final piece is we know that the way to scale that high-touch advising is to make sure that that advisor can collaborate with not just the student, but with mentors and in context of learning communities. Those communities act as a facilitated network to help students develop strong relationships that they need to be successful. And where are we right now? So we've got about 50 customers, about 200,000 users total. We've been really kind of successful so far at keeping the platform ultimately stable. You see a list of features over here on the right. I'll just say that all of these things are built around making sure that students are engaged, not just with the curriculum, but with the purpose of their education, right? Making sure they have the assets that they need to be successful both in school and then when they graduate from school. We integrate with all the major LMSs. We think of learning management systems as the classroom, right? And classrooms are really critical in certain contexts when a bunch of people need to learn something at one time and have learned it by another time. It's very useful to have a classroom for that. We integrate with all the major SISs, and ultimately we think of LRM as wrapping around and integrating with those other tools to make sure students are engaged and accomplish the outcomes that are most important to them for their education. And I'll turn that back over to Nick.
All right. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Gunnar. I think it's interesting how innovation happens. You both came from unique backgrounds and perspectives, looking at familiar problems from an unfamiliar viewpoint and producing new solutions. So they're both good stories. So everybody who's on today, please feel free to put questions in the chat. I'll lead with one I think everybody's wondering, which is, do you pronounce it LRM or LORM, or do you sternly frown on people trying to pronounce it as a word?
LRM.
LRM, no pronouncing it? Okay. What I'm curious, you probably get this question from institutions. What research and insights underpin the whole development of these systems?
That is an excellent question. Brian, if you'd like, I can take a quick stab at it and then let you jump onto that.
Sure.
Great. So we actually have a page in our website that points to the top probably 30 studies that support the approach. And what I'll tell you is that there are individual studies that support each element of LRM. So there are many studies that support the value of coaching in driving student outcomes, both conversion and retention. There are also studies that talk about the role of mentorship, the role of personalized learning plans. You know, it's both common sense and supported by research to suggest that when students have a powerful and motivating purpose for their education, they're much more likely to be successful. That being said, the research on LRM on LRM as a category is still in progress. So I'm working with a number of folks at Stanford on some studies. We do A/B tests internally with our customers whenever possible in order to directly measure the impact of the technology and the service, right? So I'll point out that what the technology does is enable a differentiated approach to students that truly puts them in the center of a longitudinal student experience that involves all those things I'm talking about. And so in our mind, the details and the real strength of it is in being able to measure it for each individual customer. So we focus on that while working with the academic institutions to do studies of what happens when you put all those pieces together for students.
Yeah, just to add on to Gunnar, this is Brian. I agree. For us, it all comes down to student engagement and student success. And we have a good example at College for America, where they were trying to keep costs down and overhead to a minimum with the amount of staff you needed to do that. And that really couldn't be done if you didn't have learning relationship management in place, because the data is all over the place. They needed to have those early detection systems in place. And it's going to be different for every school. What's important to College for America is going to be different than Cornell. It's going to be different than a community college. So it needs to be important. You need to be able to to change what you're focused on inside the system to be able to alert the appropriate people at the right time. And a great example of College for America was because it was full mastery, yes or not yet. Many times a student would get a not yet in the program and consider that failure again, and engagement would drop off, their persistence would fall off. So it was easy to have that in a learning relationship management system where when you see that happening, you could notify a coach right away. They'd be alerted, they'd set up a phone call and do an intervention even before the student saw that grade, to be able to say this is all part of learning and continue on. And that little change, was a big thing. So that's something you can see quickly in the system based on your student population with this type of technology.
All right, thank you, Gunnar. Thank you, Brian. Let's move on to the pioneers from the institutional side. They'll discuss why did they choose an LRM, how's it work, what are their outcomes to date, and across the three of them, they have experience with implementing it with completely online programs, blended programs, and face-to-face programs. So if anybody in the audience has questions from one of those perspectives, feel free to add that to the chat box. And now I'll hand it over.
Go ahead and click the talk button. Seems to be we're having another audio issue. See if we can move through here to APUS's. Caroline, do you want to jump in here?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Sure.
Oh, I'm sorry, this is Emily.
Oh, okay. All right, let me back up, Emily. Too far. Okay, here we go. Go ahead, Emily.
Sorry about that. Hi, everyone. As Nick mentioned before, my name is Emily Dustin, and I've worked in education for nearly 2 decades. My core belief, what drives me every day, is finding a way to make education better by emphasizing the importance of building relationships with our learners to foster student success. What brought me to Moderator and out of the classroom was the potential inherent in LRM as a tool for student success. Learning relationship management allows us as educators to really become students of our students. LRM allows us to transcend where learning is taking place and who is learning. LRM is helpful to every educator, so whether we're talking K through 12 or higher ed or our professional learners in industry, LRM allows us to make these vital connections to empower our learners and to help them find success. Learning relationship management revolutionizes some of the most important and fundamental aspects of education. In the 1940s, if you know education, you know Abraham Maslow, who presented his theory of the hierarchy of needs. This is a pretty important basis for our understanding that our students cannot learn if their basic human needs aren't being addressed. So we're talking in terms of things critical to, essential to student success, like physical and psychological well-being. We know that if our students are coming to us without food or shelter, or if they're feeling unsafe, it is virtually impossible for them to learn. They have greater needs on their mind. And so as educators, it's our job to help get through some of the things, the barriers, the challenges that are preventing learning from taking place. And that's what makes learning relationships so amazing, is that it brings it really into the 21st century. And these needs transcend the greatest textbooks, the best computers. None of that matters if students' well-being is threatened in any way. So learning relationship management allows us to monitor the needs of many students. As educators, we may have a caseload of 20 students at a time or 120 students at a time. And it's really difficult to track all of these basic fundamental needs. It can take hours, it can take days to compile the data. And then once we do compile that data from various sources, it's not necessarily the most usable. Right now, educators like myself and Audrey, who will speak in just a moment about the application of LRM for students that she teaches to become educators, we'll work to collect the data in our current schools SIS and LMS databases, and they could be stored in many different locations, and we'll compile it on a spreadsheet. That's as advanced as most schools are at this point without LRM. And once collected in this traditional way, the data is essentially dead. It might give us a snapshot of where our students' academic strengths and challenges currently reside at the time our data is collected, but it doesn't monitor the progress and the changes that occur throughout the year as circumstances change and demonstration of growth occurs. So we really need LRM to make data analytics a living formative tool that allows us to connect with our students to help them find their success as they move through their education and build their futures. As school models are changing and becoming more student-centered, we have to find a way to allow education to be delivered in a more personalized and individualized way. This means learning anytime, any place, and at any pace. And as I mentioned before, when we're talking about having 120 students, this becomes problematic without a tool like LRM to allow us to build these connections with our students that are vital to their success in the 21st century. But the question often comes up, what does this look like for students? How do they know that they are being successful if they're if a school is using a learning relationship management tool? And I think that it's important and fairly straightforward that, as Brian mentioned before, it's all about student engagement and motivation. And without those, we don't know that students are necessarily going to stick it out. So students staying motivated helps ensure retention by allowing them to see their progress. It's real time, it's up to date, it's constantly changing and allowing them to see where they're headed. It also provides individual student needs to be addressed by allowing for the creation of a more personalized learning path for each student, not just 30 at a time or 120 at a time, but really taking into account the needs of each student. Because it's based on goal setting. So it allows students to really think critically about what they need in order to get there. Essentially it helps students keep their eye on the prize. So in that sense, learning relationship management is ensuring completion. And I think really importantly, and there's been a lot of different studies out there about mattering, that students need to feel that they matter to their school, that they matter to their educators, their instructors, their teachers. And LRM allows students to feel connected. And this is a basic human, psychological matter. When we feel connected, we engage. And LRM lets students know that they matter, not just academically, but that all those needs that we talked about in the previous slide with Maslow, that they're of concern to their teachers. And in this way, our students' passions become our passions. We're not allowing them to face the challenges of their life alone, whether they're learning challenges or financial challenges or personal challenges. I always implored to my students when I was in the classroom to share any issues that they were having, whether in or outside of education, because if we don't know what their challenges are and we're not able to help them through that and monitor their progress, then it's difficult for us to help them overcome. So when we know better, we can do better, and that's what LRM provides for us as a mechanism for doing better. And I'll turn it over to Audrey.
Thank you, Emily. So I prepare future teachers for grades K through 12. My primary responsibility is at our undergraduate campus in Manchester, New Hampshire, serving our undergraduate population. We also have graduate students and offer hybrid and online courses as well to a significant number of students. And as part of our culture of innovation at SNHU, it's been a pleasure to partner with Preservice. And as a teacher educator, my biggest challenge over the last few years has been to prepare future teachers for a system that is absolutely in the midst of transformation. The skill set they need today is very different than my preparation to be a teacher in the 1980s. It is all about relationships. It's relationships with students, with your colleagues, with community members. It's no longer acceptable to go in your classroom and shut the door. So what students know and are able to do has become paramount. It has not been about their seat time. You know, I'm talking from the New Hampshire context that has had competency-based education in its minimum standards for a long time. But what's been missing for teachers is that infrastructure to support it. And so the Moderator LRM has enabled that. So in our pre-service courses, we're engaging students in the competency-based experiences. And that has been wonderful and exciting for them as they prepare for a K-12 system that's really 1 foot in tradition and in the industrial model and 1 foot in next practices, right? So we have a mixture as well. So Moderator has provided that flexibility, whether we're piloting in just 1 course or in some of it with our K-12 partners, these micro settings, I believe they call it. So that's been a wonderful tool to show students what's coming, what's in place in a lot of K-12 districts as they prepare for the world of teaching. And as Emily said, that data is siloed, right? It does no good if you have an Excel spreadsheet that's instantly outdated. And so what Moderator has done from the faculty, from the teacher-educator perspective, has been to put the student at the center. And that really aligns with one of our important tenets in the School of Education, which is Russ Qualia's work on student aspirations. And I think, Emily, you were leading this way, that the Qualia Institute for Student Aspirations, you talked about challenges. Getting to know our students is paramount, and being that connected educator. So rather than PowerSchool or Excel, we now are showing students this platform to model that focus on a student. And faculty educators are learning to use the LRM to have students develop their goals, to take charge of their learning, to maneuver through that dashboard, which allows that complete picture of each student. So in the past, teaching high school myself, we worked really hard to get to know our students, and any academic learning prior to their time with me was kind of lost unless I really searched for it. And I contrast that with my visit to the doctor, where I go in and he or she comes in with the iPad or their laptop, and there's this dashboard of my medical history, and when issues come up, they click, it's right there. It's such a full picture, and that's what LRMs do for educators. It's about, where are you today? Where's the progress management, real-time data, that just-in-time intervention that our pre-service teachers are experiencing, and facilitating how to collaborate with other teachers, how to get student-to-student collaboration and use of resources, really that 24/7 nature of learning. This isn't 7 o'clock to 2 p.m. Monday through Friday anymore. And from our pre-service educator perspective, they're seeing how not artificial their work has become, because it's about what they know and are able to demonstrate rather than their time in the classroom, and they're able to create their own path. Gunnar talked about that pathway. So that has been exciting, and it helps with persistence and retention, and as you can imagine, the engagement, because they're getting that feedback. So Nick had mentioned this new category that emerged, and that has supported what I'm seeing as this complete re-envisioning in the field of education. So teacher educators, yep.
Audrey, we have a question from the audience. Denise Gowdy of BC Campus asks, does an LRM collect more personal information from the student than the traditional LMS and SIS?
And I think the answer to that is it can be. So it's depending on, if you think back to Brian's slide of all the different components and the flexibility in what schools choose. So the potential is there, yes. The data is not siloed, the information is not in separate areas, it can be brought together in that student-centered context.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that really kind of wraps up what I wanted to say, just how it's exciting for teacher preparation to have a platform to support this shift that we're seeing in education. And so I'll turn it over to APUS.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. This is Caroline from American Public University System. I have to echo what Emily and Audrey shared about the importance of relationships and peer-to-peer engagement and student-to-staff engagement in terms of supporting learning and student commitment to higher education. And I'm going to take a few minutes to share with you the APUS perspective and how we've introduced our LRM, partnering with Fidelis to do so, to really help us overcome a couple of challenges that we were seeing. So to start painting the picture for you, we are a fully online institution. We have over 100,000 students, and I oversee the student services area, so I can speak to you from a student-facing staff perspective. We were seeing problems with our new student persistence. We would have students come in, they would be successful in their first courses, perhaps they'd transfer to another school, perhaps they wanted to persist but didn't have the support or tools to do so. So we wanted to introduce a tool that would allow us to connect with students in a better way earlier on. We also wanted to increase our current student engagement levels. We wanted our staff members to have access to key pieces of information in one place. So to reiterate what's been shared, the LRM allows us to bring meaningful pieces of information to our staff members' dashboard so that they can see who needs their help when they need it. In terms of scalability, this has been huge for us because our academic advisors, for example, work with hundreds and hundreds of students at one time. And then we also wanted to create a unified strategy for our co-curricular programs, service opportunities, and engagement so that we could have one place for students to meet when they were outside of the classroom. What we decided to do is partner with Fidelis to create what we call ClearPath, that's our internal term, to introduce a scalable but high-touch support tool for our student-facing staff members. I'm going to refer to the term coach. We have our coaches, our academic advisors who are active within ClearPath working with students. It's easy for them to see who needs their help. They can communicate with students quickly, nice short and sweet communication so we don't over-email, and we can check in on students in a personable and supportive way. It also introduced a single place for our students to be and connect outside of the classroom or the library. So while most of our classroom-focused learning occurs within our LMS, and students spend plenty of time in our online library researching and preparing for that learning and building on that learning, we needed a single place, a campus commons, if you will, where we could have students connect with each other and with support staff outside of the classroom. At this point, we have all of our students, undergrad, graduate, and our alumni population have access to the platform, and we're seeing some really interesting things in terms of engagement and student success. So to speak to some of the results, we introduced ClearPath in 2013. We piloted the tool with our undergraduate population for several months. We were able to improve the time it took for students to complete their transfer credit application. That can be a complicated process. We also saw higher initial persistence rates in terms of students moving past their first session of courses to their subsequent sessions. Students who worked in the ClearPath platform had higher average GPAs than those who did not. And overall, staff satisfaction about having a tool that helps them help their students has increased, as well as student satisfaction because they're able to learn and connect with each other in better ways. There's a variety of ways that an institution could use an LRM. At APUS, right now we're building out all of our online communities, so we're able to eventually move all of that engagement and social activity into one platform. Our student organizations and our mentoring program is also being built out right now. We'll be launching career services, programs, and resources. We'll have career coaches in the tool as a human resource for our students and alumni, and then faculty members excuse me, are going to be moving into the platform soon to be able to continue that relationship that they work so hard to build in the classroom. So when we have many of our courses are 8 weeks long, when a professor and a student connect and build a relationship in the course, they're able to extend that in ClearPath. These are a couple of screenshots to show you what it looks like. It really just scratches the surface in terms of the tools that are built within the platform. The larger screenshot is the student homepage. You can see where the student can articulate their purpose, their objective. They can see it, their peers can see it, their coaches can see it, the faculty can see it. So we're really able to work together to help support the student. In terms of data collection, to speak to that question, I agree that an LRM can collect more data than an LMS or a SIS, in the sense that at least within ClearPath, we have a student profile section where they can articulate information about their past, their experience, their work experience, their higher ed experience, etc. Their likes, their dislikes, etc. And then the smaller screenshot down here at the bottom gives you an idea from a coach perspective of the dashboard that they can see and that real-time data coming in, giving them feedback about which one of their students maybe missed an assignment or their GPA dropped below an acceptable minimum, which of their students are doing really well and can get a quick congratulatory note. So it's really revolutionized the way that we support our students at APUS. And that's it from me, unless anybody has any questions.
All right. Thank you, Caroline. We asked everybody to be brief so that we'd get a variety of perspectives and have time for conversation. So thank you. I know it's hard to represent everything you built and everything you've done in your pilots in such a limited amount of time. We have a couple of questions from the audience. The first is from Joe Lane. He says, the LRM offers an incredible vision of guidance and help for the learners. Do you see any way to simultaneously build their ability to learn when they don't have this kind of integrated support? And that's to anyone who chooses to answer.
This is Caroline. I can share briefly that we've incorporated and we're in the process of building out all of our student resources within ClearPath. So while there are a variety of resources related to learning and being successful in an online environment, being ready for college level work throughout our university, those kind of quote unquote resource owners can continue to own the resource, but students can access it in one place. And that's for us, it's going to be through ClearPath.
And I'll take a shot at that as well, Joe. You know, I find that the LRM actually moves closer to what students are already doing. When they go to figure out a solution to a problem, they turn to online resources and, you know, the online community and social networks, and the LRM tends to reinforce that type of collaborative response to learning. Thank you.
All right, and we have another question. Does it link to your website? How does it integrate to the website and the traditional LMS? I'm having a hard time picturing this, and that's from Christy Weeks. That may be for Brian and Gunnar, since they probably have the most experience integrating across multiple institutions.
Hey, this is Brian. So for us, I mean, integration really comes down to what the LMS is and what you're trying to bring over. So, and you really have to define what's important to you to bring over. So in the case that we've done integrations with Canvas and in Moodle, where the institution will decide what pieces of information it wants to feed back to the system to surface and then be able to monitor. So we'll have some of that data pour back into our system. In other cases, most schools will just use our LMS out of the box. So it's all baked in together, where you've got SIS bits, you've got traditional LMS in there, all tied to LRM, so it becomes one big piece of it. But if you're leveraging LTI, you can build those connections, and most of these systems do offer APIs. So in the case of Canvas, we'll be doing integration with College for America, where we could pull over once an evaluation was done, we could pull those pieces of data back into our system and surface them to their coach, and then keep track of resubmissions, or you know, if they did quizzes again, you'd be able to keep track of all of those elements. Gunnar, I'm not sure if you want to add.
We're not hearing you, Gunnar, if you're talking. I'll move on to the next question from Russ Poulin of WCET. He asks, what is required or recommended in terms of orientation for the student, the coach, or the faculty member?
I guess if we can clarify orientation in the sense of how do we get them up to speed on what LRM is as opposed to what they're used to?
Yeah, I was going to ask something similar. Everybody talked about the importance of relationships, and so there's a lot of change management if you're going to shift how the learner, the coach, the faculty member, everybody interacts. So what are good practices about how to make that shift within the institution? And so that may be more to the people representing the institutions than Brian or Gunnar.
This is Caroline. I can share that when we introduced ClearPath as our LRM, it filled a gap for us. So from a change management perspective, it was really easy for folks to jump on board and see the benefit that the tool provided us. It made, and some of the feedback we've received from the staff members that are using the tools, it made their jobs easier. So there was certainly, a training program that we created and information about who, what, why, when, in terms of, just best practices in project management. We tried to adhere to those, but it was a really easy adoption process because for us, it gave staff members a tool to allow them to better support their students.
And Audrey here.
Oh, go ahead, Audrey. This is Gunnar.
Oh, okay. Well, do you want to finish on hers, and then I'll bring in the SNA2 perspective?
Oh, that'd be terrific. Thank you. So to answer also the previous question, and then jump into that one. If you take a look at what's on the screen here, you see each of these items going down the center. That's all part of the student's plan, or they're part of their path. And so to answer the question of how you integrate with an LMS, typically what we do is we create an integration with the LMS whereby the student's courses, the 4-credit courses, are in this plan. And so when the student clicks on it, it opens up whatever the LMS is, whether it's Canvas, whether it's Blackboard, whether it's Sakai, whatever, into a new tab. That way you see everything that's relevant to that student's pathway to reach their purpose all in one place, whether those are competency-based courses that supplement and complement their core curriculum, whether those are remedial learning apps, whether those are micro-credentials and badges that will give them immediate conferrals that prove what their capabilities are, all in one place. So that's how we tend to do integration. And then we also often provide single sign-on into the students, like the school's campus, or through this thing in the upper right-hand corner where the degree is, into their degree auditing tool. To the second point, it's actually a really prescient question about how do you onboard folks, because Caroline Simpson mentioned that at APUS the onboarding process was very seamless, and I completely agree. Now that we've done close to 50 of these, what we've realized is that many schools don't have a culture of coaching. They don't have a culture of mentoring. They don't have a culture of building personalized learning plans and really being student-centered in that way. APUS happens to have already had those elements. And so what we often find ourselves doing is coming in and working with those schools in order to develop their coaching program, in order to develop a set of tools to recruit mentors from their alumni, from their partner companies, right? In order to really to help them build those things. That ends up being a very significant amount of individual consulting work that we often do with those folks in order to help give them years of experience in a very short period of time. I'll point out that LRM really, and I think Brian would probably agree with this, although I don't want to put words in his mouth, that LRM really is a set of tools, right? It's a set of tools to enable that intense personalization of the student experience. And I've got a big scar on my left hand that is proof that having power tools doesn't make you a carpenter. And so often there's an effort that we go through with our customers to build the skills necessary to apply the tools to solve those core problems that they've got. And it's as always, it's different from campus to campus to campus, and so it's a custom effort that we do together.
Hi, we have a. Oh, go ahead.
Great. And this is. Well, I was just going to quickly to answer the question from SNHU. I was going to say that it's really two major things, and number one is thinking. It's really about training people or orienting their thinking, and then of course the technology is really the maneuverability. And SNHU's approach has been orientation modules, and CFA has, College for America has very well developed orientation modules that provide an excellent model for training for students and mentors and faculty. Thank you.
We have a couple more questions about how the tool fits in with other tools. One from Denise Gowdy was how it integrates with the LMS or SIS, or if it replaces them from a student experience. And Gunnar answered that, saying the LMS can launch from it. And then a related one is, does this, from Christy Weeks, is, does this stop the student from going to the university's website? So I think the answer is different from Brian and Gunnar, so if you could both briefly address that. And I wanted to add, where do you see it going? Do you see it replacing the LMS or other elements, or not in 3 to 5 years?
This is Brian. So for us, that's our goal, right, to unify these systems. So even though we started out with the CBE focus, we quickly shifted to learning relationship management as it's needed as a support for a successful CBE program. And then you start to get into what are the other pieces, as I mentioned, that you need to have that view of the student. So you start to build out SIS elements. So we do have several partners we're working with now to replace their legacy SIS and start to move everything onto a single platform. That's reasonable for some folks, and for others that's 10 years away potentially. So you leave the door open to be able to integrate with multiple systems. So whether you want to use our LMS, which is CBE and traditional, or you want to use a combination of us with maybe another tool you've already made an investment in, we can make those connections to pull that information in based on what technology you have. I mean, if you've got a version of Colleague from 1998, it may be difficult to get data out of that, right? But if you've got a later version of these pieces of software, it's much easier to connect to them through easy connections through an API connection. So I think it's going to vary from school to school of how much they want to put into this and how much change they're willing to take on. To go back to Gunnar said earlier, with implementation of these things, I do agree with him. I think many times people are anxious for technology and they see these things and they look great and they want to use them, but sometimes they don't know how to get there. And I think with shrinking budgets and teachers having to do more and more in the classroom, I think tools like this are even more important because you may not have that advisor. And it's very difficult today for one teacher to see what's happening in another teacher's class potentially, to be able to come in and look across everything and say, why is student X doing so good over here but not so good over here? That's tough to see now. So this enables some of those things to happen. I think it helps with fewer resources. It'd be fantastic if everybody had a coaching program and an advising program to deal with this, but the reality is they don't. So I think technology comes in here and helps serve that population who can't afford those things, so no one's really left behind.
And I agree. This is Gunnar. I would agree with everything Brian just said. To answer Christy Weeks' question directly, we do single sign-on with People's Portal. I actually don't think that using this prevents students from using the portal. They play very different roles in the student's life, right? The portal is like your campus. It's like it's a link farm of everything that students could possibly need. The LRM is about organizing what students actually need to accomplish their purpose. And so students probably do go to the portal less often, but in 100% of the cases where we've worked with our customers to analyze their portal usage, you find that there's 3 or 4 things that students, there's 50 links in the page, but there's 3 or 4 that students use all the time. And so what you can't see on the demo that Caroline gave earlier is kind of quick links that students can set up to support them getting to those things. And on the question of whether or not you replace the LMS, I think of Blackboard, Canvas, Desire to Learn, Moodle, Sakai as really kind of specific features, right? They are an online classroom. And anytime you need a classroom, you need that set of features, right? It is about providing the faculty member in that course content context the ability to teach their class and provide the communication with their students that they need. That's a very useful thing in many circumstances. But for all the other things that you want students to learn that doesn't involve that classroom, that's where an LMS comes in. So to the extent that over the next 10 to 15 years, there's going to be an accelerating migration from traditional classrooms to competency-based teaching and learning environments, I think you're going to see a decreasing reliance on the traditional LMS and an increasing reliance on what we all now know as LRM. I don't know whether that'll be 3 years, 5 years, 15 years, but I know it's happening, and you can see it in the DNA of the schools that are implementing LRM, that decreasing reliance on LMS is happening and will likely continue to happen.
Thanks. This is a question for Emily, Audrey, and Caroline. What have been the surprises as you've implemented, both positive and negative? What are the things you learned that you didn't expect?
This is Audrey. I can start with that. One of the, I guess, surprises would be students' reluctance to engage sometimes with owning their own path, setting their goals, really taking direction, having an opinion, and really shaping and seeking out resources. That takes a little bit of transition for them as well because of the traditional nature of our K-12. But I think it's from a positive has been, in general, people's reaction that this is the future, that this does fit with where we're headed in education. Thank you.
Hi, this is Emily, and I would like to just piggyback on what Audrey said. I think the biggest surprise for me is the momentum that's building nationwide in the move to competency-based education, and the number of schools trying to move to that without having a tool like LRM. And so I think that, it's surprising to me that schools are still trying to make that transition using their traditional LMS and gradebook management and systems like that really don't support the idea of learning at various paces and various places. There's not a lot of agility in older LMS systems, and so really the foundation for me and the most important aspect of learning relationship management is that it allows us to continue to move and grow and build more student-centered learning environments that are fostered through programs like competency-based ed.
And hi, it's Caroline. I'll echo what Audrey said in terms of student participation. We have the platform open to all of our students and our alumni now, and we kind of braced ourselves for this big rush of adoption and work, and it's happening over time more slowly, which has actually been a benefit because we can do it really well. And as a result, that's why we're moving in more tools, resources, and benefits so that students have a reason to come to the platform and to engage and connect. And so that was a surprise, though. We thought that it would just be like we'd wake up one day and all of our students would be in ClearPath. On the positive side, and I mentioned this before, university-wide acceptance and adoption was really high. Everybody was ready for a tool that would help connect the dots, so to speak, and to allow us to be better collaborative partners.
All right, thank you. We just have 2 minutes left. For anybody in the audience that's intrigued, that's already been looking at this or is now wondering what to do next, I'm wondering from anyone in the panel what tips you have for those people that are curious or evaluating systems. So what questions should they be asking themselves? What kinds of conversations should they have internal to their institution? How can they get more information? Who should they talk to external to their institution?
This is Brian. I'll be brief, so I know Gunnar will have some things to say on this. But for me, it's really about the ability to implement this and how you think about implementing it. So I think many schools see this as something as an all or nothing in implementation, whether it be LRM or CBE. I think you can take small steps to get here, and it doesn't have to be overnight. I think just as LRM is an emerging category and CBE is an emerging category, there's a lot of unknown still, and I think taking a small step is the best step. And realize that you're not going to get it 100% right the first time, but take the time to learn the tools. I think both Gunner's company and Moderator, Fidelis and Moderator, I think they're there to help lead you down that path if you need help, if you just ask. So I think in partnership with our companies and others who are doing this, lean on them, but just take that first step to head down that path and be agile, right? I mean, things are going to change over time, so be adaptable to that change.
Yeah, I would echo what Brian just said. This is Gunnar. Our experience has been that when you plant the seeds of this approach, of the student-centered approach to an entire life cycle and managing it around the student's purpose, that even if it's a small seed, even if you plant it in some corner of your university, one department, one school, one very narrowly defined problem that you're trying to solve, when you plant it, it automatically starts to want to grow, right? People will see what you're doing and pick it up someplace else. The trick is really about being hyper-focused on the results you're trying to get, the outcomes you're trying to solve, both for the students and for your institution. And when you do that, you create a model for expansion. But trying to do it all at once it's too hard to get the political forces all aligned. But as soon as you've got that success scenario, then it starts to grow. We've seen that in American Public. We've seen that in a number of our other large customers. So happy to chat with anybody who's interested in continuing the conversation. And want to thank WCET for setting this up. This is great. Nick, you did a terrific job of moderating. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. We are out of time, so it looks like we'll need to close. It's great to have everyone on the panel. I really appreciate your time and all the thought you brought to this. Thanks, everyone who came to enjoy the presentation. Anything else, Megan?
Nick, this is Megan. Thank you again for a wonderful webcast. Great questions. You did a wonderful job moderating, so thank you for the wonderful interaction from the audience and our presentations today. Stay in touch with WCET. Join us in just a few weeks here in Denver for our annual meeting. Stay tuned about upcoming webcasts. And I want to thank our technology provider, Blackboard, our supporting members, our wonderful list of annual sponsors that help underwrite all of our programs, and to everybody that joined us today. I'll record this and send it out to you. If you have any other questions, feel free to get a hold of us here at WCET. Enjoy your day.
Thank you, everyone.